Hi there. So I've just been today testing all day the AirDesign RISE 5, which I've actually flown quite a lot already, last year quite a bit. And as well, its light sibling, the SOAR 2. So first of all, the RISE 5 is the standard weight version, and the SOAR 2 is equivalent wing, but made out of lighter materials. But they are basically the same glider, pretty much. I believe very, very similar, and they certainly fly very similar. We'll come on to that. As usual, get the usual kind of differences that you do between the standard weight and the lightweight version. So first of all, on the ground, I've done lots of ground handling with it, lots of launches in all different conditions, as I like to do. Speaking with the RISE 5, I think for a high B wing, it's very sorted. You do need to give it a good bit of encouragement, make sure you give a good firm input on it to make sure it comes up straight. There's a slight tendency with that slightly higher aspect ratio. If you're vague and your input or a bit asymmetric, then one tip might come up more than the other. So I'd say that for a high B is a little bit more impetus than that, a little bit more tendencies than that. But overall, for a high B wing, a high B pilot shouldn't be having any problems launching this. Well, I mentioned that. I do think the RISE 5 and the SOAR 2 are a little bit at the higher end of the high B category, and that's given away a little bit by their aspect ratio. But just when you fly them in very sporty conditions, I think they're one of the gliders that's a little bit on the higher side of the high B. So I'd say for somebody who's moving on to their first high B wing, well, if they've already been flying a mid B wing, then that might work well. But if it's like you're moving from a low B or an A wing onto your first high B, then I personally wouldn't be recommending the RISE 5 or the SOAR 2 as your first high B wing. In terms of handling, the first thing about the brakes, the brake travel is relatively short for a high B, and it also goes from the brakes not having anything to going quite firm almost immediately on about, I don't know, it's about 10 to 15 centimeters, so a little bit on the shorter side for a high B wing compared to some where you've got a longer travel before there's a connection and then a sort of more progressive application of brakes. So for the RISE 5, it goes to a very firm and direct kind of feeling. So that does mean it's got quite firm and direct handling. I do tend to fly with it in a classic half wrap, just a half wrap kind of thing. But you can actually fly the wing just with your hands in the toggles. And because the brake travel's relatively short, if you're only doing sort of moderate turns and things like that, then it's okay. And the brake pressure is quite firm. It's definitely not light. It's not really heavy, but it is on the firmer side. I found after I was flying with a glider for a few hours and having to thermal and turn a lot in our UK small punchy thermals, and I was having to really core it and stuff like that, then you do notice the brake pressure. It's a bit on the higher side. With the SOAR 2, as it's a bit lighter, the brake pressure is a little bit lighter. There's a little bit less inertia in the turn just because of the weight, which is standard, I find, with the standard weight and lightweight wings. There's just a little bit less inertia there, a little bit more responsiveness. On that note, I'd put the agility of the RISE 5 and the SOAR 2, I think they're very similar, just for the SOAR 2 having a little bit less inertia because of less weight. But their agility is moderate. They're not very agile gliders, I don't find, and even flown quite at the top of the weight range. I think the agility is moderate. It's good, but they're not highly agile gliders. I feel like they are made to be a bit more on the performance side, the way that they've been trimmed and set up and the way that they feel, so that they're a bit more on the performance side. They turn flat and efficient. What you do learn is with good weight shift, they respond a lot to weight shift, I feel. So if you're using good weight shift and stuff like that, and then with the brakes, you can then make the glider turn nice and tight and get it round. Some wings, it just, when you turn, when you're putting a brake in and turn, they just turn very sweet and agile and quick. Say the Niviuk Ikuma 3 comes to mind there, and I think that's a little bit more on the agile side. And the Rise 5 is tuned to be a little bit more on the flatter turning side. Now onto the actual climb rate. So I think the Rise 5 and the SOAR 2 climb really well. I think it's the kind of wing that the pilot needs to dial into a little bit, how to get the best out of the handling. So if you go from your A glider or some very basic low B glider, and you go to the Rise 5 or the SOAR 2, I think most pilots are going to definitely notice that extra aspect ratio and kind of having to think about the glider being kind of more performant in the turns and having to dial into a little bit more into that compared to some other, the lower aspect ratio high B wings and some of the easier ones, the Chile 5, that's one of the main ones that comes to mind right now. That's just kind of a little bit kind of easier in the turn with that lower aspect ratio. Flying in active air and turbulence, I think they do require a bit more active flying than some of the wings to avoid having tip tucks and things like that. To some other gliders, I think they're a bit more collapse resistant and can kind of get away with not flying quite so actively. And I think the Rise 5 and the SOAR 2, they're aiming at pilots who have a good feeling of the wings and who are going to fly actively. Of course, with any high B wing, any pilot flying any high B wing should be flying actively. But I do think that they need a little bit more active flying than some others in choppy air. In terms of performance, well, I was talking about the climb. I think they're a very good all-round climber. So they climb very well in light stuff and they climb really well in strong thermals as well. But yes, very good all-round performance. And I think that goes through to the general performance of the wing as well. It performs well in light conditions. You're generally feeling like you're doing well in it. In light conditions, and then when the conditions get strong, it's still doing well and still performing well, gliding into wind and dealing with that. So even though the wing might require a bit more active flying than some easier wings, it's actually performing very well and gliding and dealing with chop very well. The glide, I think the performance in terms of glide is very good in the high B. I think it's definitely, again, with being at the higher end, I think it's one of the better forming high Bs. So it has very good performance, very good glide. So going on to the speed bar, it picks up a good turn of speed. It's relatively light across the whole travel. So it's not heavy and very usable, and it's quick. It just feels like it's good and competitive for the class. I'm not sure whether it's one of the fastest, but it's got good speed and it keeps a good glide. The only thing I will note about it is a little bit on full bar, the leading edge gets a little bit of dimpling and a little bit of flutter on it. But that's just my little picky thing. The actual glider feels really solid and glides still very well, so it doesn't seem to affect it. Certainly in terms of all-round performance for a high B wing, it's certainly competitive in the high B class. For soaring, thermaling, cross-country, gliding into wind, it's competitive for the class, both the Rise 5 and the SOAR 2. Yeah, good all-rounders. That's the main thing that comes across to me. I think they're good wings for flying cross-country in the flatlands, the little hills and the flatlands, and they're going to be good wings for flying cross-country in the mountain areas as well. For descent techniques, so for the Rise 5, it does classic big ears using the split A's. You can see even surprisingly for this class, it has the ears thing on it. Yeah, so that's very easy, nice and easy to reach. The ears come in nice and easy, and they sit there nice and stable. And there's a good increase of descent rate. So very usable, effective, staying nicely. To clear them out, I've generally found if I just let go of them, they just stay in. And so I found the best thing is to pump them out. It doesn't do tip stalls. Tried that on that a good few times, the way the lines are rigged up with the rear outer lines. It doesn't do tip stalls. Spiral dives, nothing to report particularly. Very controlled spiral dive, easy to go into the spiral dive and control it to build up speed, ease off speed. I didn't find any tendency to sort of lock in or anything like that. Coming out, again, was nice and controllable. So I felt that was all very good. Coming down to the stall, the brake pressure is firm. So going down to stall, the brake pressure gets even firmer. So it really firms up. So the stall point's really obvious. So from a point of brake pressure, it's very clear and very obvious where the stall point is. It very noticeably and clearly firms up just around that stall point. And you can feel the glider, from the glider side, you can feel that it starts to, you're getting near the edge of that stall point. I would just point out, I think, because I found that I'm using quite a lot of force. So considering the level of pilot, as a high B pilot, I'd just say that a little bit, just be cautious, because you are getting used to the idea of being firm on the brakes to stall the glider and come in and flare. Just be a bit careful if you're being really coming in for a tricky slope landing in a bit gusty conditions and you're using loads of brake. What I've found is the glider will very much stalls from the tips first, rather than stalling across the whole wing. and you just need to be a little bit sensitive to when the glider is actually stalling and dropping back, just a little bit. So looking at the rises of the Rise 5, you can see here 12mm webbing, like so. Yeah, there's the speed system, as I said, with the run stand, 20mm pulley at the top, but I find a little surprising a smaller pulley at the bottom. But as I said, the speed system is actually relatively light, so obviously that's affecting. The build quality is all very good, excellent. So yeah, I just want to show you this on the AirDesign one because it's a little bit on the complicated side. It reminds me a little bit of the 777 one in some ways, although it's different, but just a bit complicated. So you can see here, it's got a line attached that goes up inside through a ceramic ring with a little ball there. So as you pull down on the rises, the rear rises, it's catching on that ball to give you the travel that you want. And it does work well. So I have found that in the air flying with on the rear rises using that BC bridge, it does work well. As we always say, with a 3-liner, with these BC bridges, even the best of them, it's not quite the same as a 2-liner, especially ones 2-liners with very good connection on the rear rises. But it does give you a similar kind of feeling. I don't quite buy any of them that say it's exactly like the same from my testing. And one other point I wanted to make here is just this part here. I've got a little criticism, is that I've had a couple of times this line go like that and catch on there. So what I'm going to actually do is get another O-ring and put that on there. So the brakes, do find the handles nice. They're got a good padded section here, and they've gone for poppers. All right, that's it. I'm going flying. See ya. Bye. Whoa.